Welcome to another episode, everybody. Proud to sit down. First guest in the studio here, Mr. Scott Diggs, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu brown belt, entrepreneur, social activist, and welcome, man.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So let's dive right in. How did you get started in martial arts? Like, what, was it YMC karate that brought you in, or where did you get your start?
So, I originally started with wrestling, like most folks do around here, right?
Yeah.
So I started wrestling in probably third grade. I was kind of that wiry, ADD kid that always needed something to do. So my dad was always keeping me in stuff. So I was wrestling, really dove into that. About the same time, I was doing some taekwondo. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be Bruce Lee and kick folks.
Who didn't?
so I started with that. A little later, then I ended up doing some boxing when I was in high school, and then some judo, and then didn't fall into, but actively pursued jiu-jitsu because I realized it was the pinnacle of martial arts.
Yeah, I probably know the answer because I think it's how most people do, but how did you discover jiu-jitsu?
You already know. Blockbuster one Friday night, I'm like, dude, what is this? It doesn't look like people are punching people in the face. I can get behind this. So I checked out the UFC video, saw this gangly kid. I'm like, I will bend that kid up. Like, who is he? I don't know. I knew I was a good wrestler.
Yeah.
And I saw this gangly looking kid, and I'm thinking, I think I can beat that kid. And then I seen him beating guys that I didn't think I could beat. So then I got excited about there's something to this whole thing. I better find out what it is.
Yeah, dude, it's crazy. I remember the same thing, just seeing that UFC 1. And I remember watching Hoist come down, and I'm like, yo, I'm going to watch somebody die tonight.
Right.
This dude is going to die.
Right.
He's going to get murdered.
Right.
And I was wrong, man. Good thing I didn't bet money on it.
No, because he looked extremely unintimidating. Yep. And he didn't look threatening at all. No. But we learned.
Yeah, quick. And even then, even after I watched it happen, I was like, that has to be a fluke.
Right.
And then UFC 2 rolls around, and I was like, yo, that's no fluke. That's no fluke. What's going on? And it wasn't until years later that I discovered a place that I could actually train at, because that was 93 that all went down, UFC, 93, 94. And it wasn't until 2000 that I started training jiu-jitsu. When did you start?
Man, so the story's a little convoluted. I guess I was in college. I had always wrestled, so probably early 2000s maybe. I was aware of jiu-jitsu from the message boards. I remember Moosel's message board, and I think the Underground had a message board.
Yeah, the Underground, yeah.
And so I was getting into jiu-jitsu, and I was searching through all the back of the black belt magazines looking for videos, and I think this was the early 2000s. I remember there was some fighting going over in Japan, like Pancrase, and maybe Pride was around at that time. So I'm going through these black belt magazines, and I'm getting all the VHS tapes. I'm getting Waleed Ismail and Marco Huas and all these guys. And so I'm in my living room with my son, who's a toddler at the time. I'm trying to do some things to him. I'm like, I need to do this jiu-jitsu, but there was no jiu-jitsu, right? Yeah. So I found the next best thing I thought was judo. Mm-hmm. There was a judo academy in Williamsport, and so I went to judo. I'm guessing this was 2002 to 2004, somewhere in there. And while I'm at judo, I was pretty decent at judo because of my wrestling. I learned a couple throws pretty quick, but my whole thing was I wanted to be on the ground.
Yeah.
So a guy had come in. His name was Tom Murphy. He had trained with Alex Brito and Sergio Salza.
Okay.
In Doylestown, I think they were Brazilian top team. And then I think he had prior been with Mark Coleman and them guys out in Ohio at the Hammer House.
Yeah.
So, but he was from the Lock Haven area. Well, he came in and started training judo with us, and he was a purple belt. And I was to me, you might as well have been Jesus Christ if you had a purple belt.
Yeah.
Because I'm this is unheard of.
Yep.
So me and him would sneak off as much as we could and just start doing newaza, what they would call it in judo or whatever, which for us was really just jujitsu.
Jiu-jitsu, yeah.
But then we had the instructor there was a old school hardcore judo practitioner, and I think he was on the national level in terms of training guys.
Yeah.
So he was not a big fan of newaza. He wanted to throw people on their heads.
Yep.
So we had to kind of sneak and do our thing there.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with judo where it was, was Sensei Murdy, and he was the old school judo.
Yeah.
I'm just going to throw you on your face. That jujitsu stuff is cute, but eventually he came around. But in the beginning, it was, that jujitsu stuff is cute.
No
but
doubt.
everybody changes their mind eventually.
No doubt.
Once you're exposed to it. So, so you train judo. You have some experience with sneaking around jujitsu. Then when does it become official, where you're like, all right, I'm no longer doing judo. I'm full in on jiu-jitsu.
So I'm gonna say it was probably about 2003-ish. I'm still, checking out the internet trying to find where I can do jiu-jitsu, and there was a guy in Mifflinburg, Jeff Ramsey, who was doing some jiu-jitsu with, I think he was training. He did Japanese jiu-jitsu,
Yes.
but then he also was doing some stuff with Henzo up in the city on the weekends and stuff. So I started going down to Jeff Ramsey's as much as possible. I was going there, at least a couple times a week, I'd say. So that was probably 2003. There were some good wrestlers coming in there, so I was getting my fix of grappling, but it still wasn't what I needed. Just side note, one day I was there and this kid comes in and he's like a young hawk dude, and like I said, I was still probably in my early 30s, so I still thought I was pretty tough or whatever. So this kid comes in, and it was just me and him real early on a Saturday, and this kid starts launching me from one end of the gym to the next, just throwing me everywhere. And I'm like, who is this dude? I'm like, who are you? He's like, oh, I wrestle Lock Cave. And he's like, I'm like, well, where'd you come from? He's like, I came from Maine. I'm like, oh, okay. So come to find out, this is Tim Bosch.
Oh, Jesus.
So then when I realized who he was, I didn't feel so bad about him just throwing me just everywhere.
Yeah.
But I felt pretty helpless in the moment. And then so I'm just constantly on the internet, and then one day you popped up. And I don't remember where your school was. I think it was I don't know these towns up here, Oliphant or something. I don't know.
Probably, I think the first time we ever trained together was on Mulberry Street in Scranton. That was that big, it used to be a motorcycle shop.
Yeah.
It was big and had the big windows open on the main. I think that was the first place we had ever trained. My place before that was on Greenridge Street, and that was a real tiny place.
What city was it?
That was Scranton as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
the first time I can remember us training together was on Mulberry Street.
What was your first academy? What city?
So the first academy I had was on Greenridge Street in Scranton. It was just a little. It was right next to a smoke shop. I think it was a total of 1,000 square feet.
Okay.
Where when we went over to Mulberry Street, that was a much larger building, and that was where we had CrossFit in the back.
Oh, I definitely remember that.
We had the mats all out, and that was the time we were just getting. Not just getting into MMA. We had already been doing MMA, but that was where it really started to become
what year was
almost
that?
our identity. 2006, 2007, somewhere in there.
Yeah, that's probably about when I started training with you, because it was 2008 when I got the blue belt. So it was probably around 2006 or 7 that I started training with you. And funny story about that is I still thought I was a good wrestler, a tough guy, and thought that would translate to jiu-jitsu seamlessly, and I didn't really know. So the first time I ever rolled with you, you were a bit smaller than me, so I thought I was just gonna overpower you. I still didn't know the true power of jiu-jitsu. So I tried to overpower you, and I think I grabbed something and just was holding on to it, and then we decided to reset because I was just doing nothing but holding whatever I was grabbing. So we reset, and then you just proceeded to put me in it was a combination of a crucifix, a cross collar choke, and a wrist lock. It was just everything at once. And that's when I realized I outweighed this guy by 30 pounds.
Yeah.
And he literally just did something to me that was just brutalized me.
Victimized.
And that's when I knew I'm never stopping doing this.
What was that, purple belt then? Or was I blue?
I don't remember if you were, I think you might have been blue or purple, but
Yeah,
you were very good.
Yeah, that would have been right in that blue to purple transition. It gets all fuzzy. I don't remember when and where promotions happened, and that type of things. But
I do remember the feeling of helplessness and realizing that whatever I had grabbed, maybe I grabbed your ankle, was just holding it. I realized in that moment I wasn't doing anything, and you literally just taught me a lesson seconds later about the difference between grabbing and holding something and doing jiu-jitsu.
And doing something with it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I think, if my recollection's correct, Ron White was with you. Like, you guys had come up to train, Ron White, maybe Lou. There was like a small group of you guys. But I think we met initially down at an MMA event in Jersey. Is that where we first met? I think Ron White was fighting. I think.
Oh, probably. Yeah. We used to go out to Atlantic City a lot.
Atlantic City at the House of Blues.
Yeah,
New Breed fighting. I think that's where we first met you guys. Was because I had Hedis fighting there. I had Keith Jacobs fighting there.
Yeah.
A couple other guys.
Maybe
I was
Gary
actually
Peters, maybe?
Gary Peters maybe. I was scheduled to fight on that card, and my opponent had pulled out. So I was just around backstage a lot. But I remember. I think that was where we first.
That makes sense.
That's where we first met.
That makes sense.
And because I remember Ron White, if I'm remembering correctly, and I'm gonna have Ron White on here one of these days because he's a character. I like having conversations with him. But I think I remember watching Ron White pull mount. He had the guy up against the cage. I don't know what he tried to do, but he pulled the guy to mount. And he did it like 3 times during the course of the fight. And I remember talking to him.
Wait. He pulled the guy to mount on top of himself?
Yeah, he pulled mount. And
We're doing wrong.
Yeah, we're doing something wrong. And I remember, saying, dude, you got, come train with us. You're from the Williamsport area. Like, we're not far from you. And I think that's how we all kind of got connected.
That makes sense.
Because at that time I wasn't even Gracie NEPA. I was still Hoist Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Network in Scranton.
Okay.
My academy didn't even have a name. It was just like, the Hoist Gracie Network in Scranton.
Yeah.
But I think that's how we got linked up with like Vicious and everything, and then
I think you're right.
the long-term friendship just kind of developed in the training and what have you. But that's 20 years ago, and I've been choked a lot, so my memory might be a little foggy.
That seems right to me.
I think that's right.
Time frame is definitely right because I remember, I had a decent job at the time where I could get some days off work, and I remember driving up here a lot with Ron and Grant. Filming,
yeah.
Grant he was a tough character.
Yeah.
Some other guys I remember. So it's been a long time, but yeah.
Because that was right. That was right because I think MMA became legalized in PA 2009.
Okay.
So it was. I know it was leading into that because I remember we used to have to travel down to Jersey to fight.
Yeah. And
then it was like, hey, MMA's coming.
Yeah.
And that was like the big explosion. I know our team blew up. I know Team Vicious blew up. And it was like even to the point where I think a lot of our fighters were going against each other.
Oh, yeah.
We're like you and I were in opposite corners coaching fighters.
Yeah,
because it was such a commodity at that time to get on these cards.
Yeah,
because everybody wanted to do it.
For sure.
And they were filtering through the talent, and a lot of the talent was coming out of us, Team Vicious, Rat Pack.
Yeah.
Balance Studios.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of the talent was coming out of those hotbeds.
Yeah.
And then you had your little pop-ups here and there that had like one good guy maybe coming out of the YMCA or something. But there was probably 4 or 5 like real groups that were just sending fighters.
Yeah,
constantly.
definitely. I remember like some real battles between us and you all, and like you said, the Rat Pack guys and us, or Rat Pack and you. Balance was in the mix. Yeah, like those were the good old days.
I was just having a conversation. I was down at Rat Pack not too long ago, and I was talking with Nick Massington, and we were just like reminiscing on those old days, where it was like that was savagery, that was brutality back then.
And Nick was the man. Nick was putting on the Inoki grappling events.
Yeah.
I mean that probably was a little later.
That was later, yeah. That was definitely later.
That was all fun stuff as well.
That was all good. And same thing. Like we always had people going to his events as well. But I was just down there. One of his guys was promoted a black belt, so I went down. I wanted to be there for him and what have you. And we were just having that conversation about the old days of like you didn't cross train with other gyms. We were an anomaly, I think. Like my school and Team Vicious, I think we were anomalies. Like back then, people didn't cross train together.
No.
If you trained with anybody else, you were like, you were shunned and you were thrown off your team and kicked off your team. But I think we all saw value in like, hey, we need bodies, we need training partners, we need learning curves, we need
definitely because our thing was we had talent in terms of we had really gritty, hard-nosed wrestlers. We had some good boxer strikers. And then we had me who was trying to learn the essence of jiu-jitsu from videotapes with no instruction.
Yeah.
And so that was the big difference. Like, I mean, I spent countless hours. Like, it's all I did. Like, if I could count up the hours of jiu-jitsu that I studied, it's ridiculous. But I never had, I never had the guidance and the direction. So it's like I was doing things to my understanding, which was fine when I didn't have anything else. But it doesn't compare to having you, a coach, someone who I could go to and say, you know, how do I solve this problem? Or this is the way I think it's supposed to be done. And then you say, well, make this tweak, make this adjustment.
Yes, yeah.
So getting on board with you was like, that was game changing for us.
Yeah.
Because all the things that I was maybe misinterpreting or didn't quite understand, I now had a point of reference to, you know, it's not that I ever intentionally taught my guys bad technique. And most of what I taught was decent technique. But when I finally had your guidance, it's when I knew that the product that I was giving them was what I was advertising.
Yeah.
You know, because I was telling them, you know, we're learning jiu-jitsu here. But were we really? Kind of.
Yeah. Yeah.
To my understanding.
Right.
But when I got with you, it's like, now I know I'm giving you exactly what it is I'm selling.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny how there's levels to the game, because I remember being in that same boat where it was like, you had Grappling Magazine, you had the DVDs, you know, or VHSs really. Some books, you know, they were like real, like chintzy, like PDF style books that you could pick up in the bookstore.
Yeah.
But it was hard to decipher that stuff, you know, and it was so there, you know, other than going to Philly or going out to, you know, Cali, to find somebody with a true deep understanding of jiu-jitsu was difficult. There was guys around who were doing jiu-jitsu, and they could, you know, guide me along a path of their understanding. But again, they weren't masters of the art. They were blue belts themselves.
Right.
Like, you know, and again, a blue belt to a white belt is a large leap. So of course there was knowledge to be offered, but it wasn't that deep understanding of jiu-jitsu.
Yes.
You know, it wasn't until years later that I really started to have a deeper appreciation of what jiu-jitsu really was.
For sure. I mean, this is the way I look at it, is like, people don't know what they don't know, right?
Yes.
So, you know, if I know there's, was there 9 planets in the universe, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, this is the entire universe.
Right.
But then when I realize how expansive the universe is beyond that,
it's
a whole different game.
A whole different game.
So it's like I had a decent understanding. So for a guy who had no understanding, me as a blue belt or whatever I would have been at the time, I was offering them some value, but at the same time, I wasn't. I was probably causing them as much headache as I was actually instructing them, right?
Yeah.
But the thing I was careful to do is that I never sold myself as saying, like, listen, like, I'm teaching you jiu-jitsu. I was always very clear that, like, I don't really even know what I'm doing at this point, right?
Yeah.
I think I have some understanding, so just bear in mind that what I'm showing you is my best understanding, but that there's levels to this,
Yes.
right? And so that's why I never charge people. You know what I mean? I never said, you know, pay me for what I'm teaching. It was more like, hey, let's get together and figure this out together.
Yeah.
Because I knew, like, I had enough awareness to know that to know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then as I grew and started to really understand the depths and the level and, like, the intricacies, it was like training with me as a blue belt. If that's all you have available to you, do that.
Yes.
But be very clear that, like, I'm a blue belt and what I'm showing you is rudimentary, and it goes so much beyond it that even now as a brown belt, I know I have a vast amount of knowledge, but I also realize, like, there's a whole world of things that I don't understand.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's
that's
like
crazy.
I want to train with someone like you who has that.
Yeah, and it's insane that there's those things, because I'll teach something. You know, for instance, I just recently taught a variation on a switchback sweep from half guard, and one of the students who's been with me a long time goes, "Man, you've changed that since, you know, back in the day, right?
Yeah.
Back as a purple belt, you used to do. Why don't you do it this way anymore?" I said, "Because I understand it better."
Yes.
You know, I've learned what to do and what not to do. My understanding back as a purple belt of this sweep was, you know, kindergarten to college.
Yes.
You know, that's the vastness
Yes.
of it. And even still now, I'm still making strides and learning. Just recently, I use this story all the time to just illustrate to people to keep an open mind. the last time Rob Kahn was up, he was just talking. He was on the mat lecturing, and it was during a technique we were practicing, and he was just lecturing, and real offhanded comment. Whatever he was talking about, I don't even remember, because the one sentence just short-circuited my brain. He said, I focus now, the focus of my jiu-jitsu now is making my opponent worse at jiu-jitsu.
Yes.
And I went, what?
Yes.
Like, that shut down my brain. I couldn't tell you what happened the rest of that seminar. That's how shut down my brain was. And I dwelled on that and dwelled on that and dwelled on that. And eventually I was like, I get what he's saying. I get what he's saying. You know, develop strategies, develop blueprints, develop these things that eliminate the playing pieces from the board before the opponent ever gets to use them.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's what that for me was like. Up until that point, maybe I had been doing it on a subconscious level, but it certainly wasn't anything I was thinking about.
Yeah.
You know, and I went, whoa. So here I am, 22 years into jiu-jitsu, and I have an epiphany like
Game
that.
changer. Yeah.
You
No,
know?
I look at like this is my evaluation, but I think there's like two ways to play jiu-jitsu. Like there's like jiu-jitsu where I'm doing movement, and there's jiu-jitsu where I'm stopping movement.
Yes. Yeah.
So I look at like say like Gary Tonin, like he would be a guy who I consider does movement.
Yeah.
And then I look at like Gordon Ryan, and I think he's more a guy who stops movement.
Yes.
You know, and I think they're both valid ways to play, but
absolutely,
but different.
Yeah, and the guys that can do both are
Deadly.
really, really dangerous.
Deadly.
Those guys are crazy. So let's see, we covered how you got into it. We covered how we met. Covered training. You're teaching what now? 4 days a week, 5 days a week, 6 days a week? We're talking training ahead of time.
About 4 days a week.
Plus some open mats.
We're doing open mat. So during COVID, I had stopped.
Killer.
I had stopped training for a while because I had some people in my family that have immunocompromised, and I just couldn't risk bringing that back to them.
Right.
So since early 2000, like I hadn't gone a week without training.
Yeah.
So now here I am, a whole year with no training. So like, what do I do with my time? So I'm watching video, which I always do, or listen to podcasts, what I always do. But I thought, how can I? Because I want to be able to get my students to a point where they are as good as I can get them, as quickly and as efficiently as I can get them there. Because for me, like I said, it's been a long journey because, you know, I had to try and build some pieces around me to grow into this, you know, until I really hooked up with you. But I figured, how do I touch up my coaching? So I went back and I started studying the Gracie University stuff, because I thought, you know, let me get a program in place where I'm teaching my new guys that are coming in some foundational stuff before I throw them in the deep water with the killers.
Yep.
So I went back and started studying that. And then when you talk about evolution of the game, so anyways, I got that belt or whatever through studying the program and just refreshing it. But when you talk about the evolution of the game, I got this awareness that like that what they're teaching is, of course, it's good fundamental solid stuff, but things have evolved even since then when that's come out, maybe 8 or 9, 10 years ago, whenever that first came out.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like an epiphany as well.
Yeah, and it was funny, like, you know, to your point of when that quarantine hit and that lockdown hit, and we weren't able to train jiu-jitsu. You know, it was illegal to train jiu-jitsu. You know, like, you know, we were getting together and locking the door and you know, not letting people come in and training behind locked doors. But for me to have done something for 20 years every day of my life and then suddenly not be able to do it, I was like depressed.
Oh, bro.
And I'm sure a lot of people went through depression, but I remember being like, waking up in the morning just like, this day sucks, like whatever. And I don't know, maybe like a week or two where I realized like, okay, we're not coming out of this anytime soon. So, you know, stop being depressed. You're not going to be a fat piece of shit and, you know, be lazy. And I did the same thing. I went back and started polishing my coaching techniques. I sat down. I was revisiting blueprints and rewriting my notes and tearing them apart and you know, getting strategies back together and consulting, you know, guys like Rob who are really into like the art of strategy. And basically just came out of quarantine with a whole new, fresh curriculum. It was all the stuff I was teaching, but it had a whole new, fresh paint on it. And the other thing I did was, you know, like you said, you want to be the best coach. I started studying. It's now called Wondrium, but before that it was called the great courses. Right, it was an app on like Roku, and what it is college lectures, and you just pay like a monthly subscription. You can watch anything, you know, you could whatever the subject is, economy, Roman history, whatever. They had all these subjects, right? So what I started doing was watching these lecturers on first on topics that I enjoyed, right, and I was taking notes on the lecturer. It wasn't anything about the topic. It was how do they engage people? How do they talk to people? How do you know what's the languages they're using and all this stuff? And then I would start to go into topics I had zero interest in. And if the lecturer could pull me in, I was really taking notes. You know, I'm sitting there, I'm writing notes. My wife would be like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm taking notes, quiet." You know, like, and I came out of that with a whole different understanding on teaching and mentoring. And how to help these young guys and approach and what have you. So that whole lockdown thing was a blessing, you know, in disguise, so to speak.
So for me, one of the reasons why I've always gravitated towards you is, so I think there's a difference between understanding a thing and then being able to convey that message to another person. And I think it's rare when you find someone who has a deep understanding of a thing and a tremendous ability to relay the message in a way that people can receive it. So like for me, I don't think there's very few jiu-jitsu minds that are, in my estimation, sharper than, say, John Danaher.
Yes, correct.
But his teaching philosophy his teaching is so philosophical that for me to really absorb the information sometimes gets to be a tedious task. Right? So even though I want to hang on every word he says, it's often difficult because I have a attention problem. So it's difficult for me. But in dealing with you, I find someone who has a deep understanding of jiu-jitsu, but also an incredibly efficient way of conveying the message.
I appreciate that. Similar things. I've trained with, you know, name after name after name, right? UFC Hall of Famers, world champions, this and this and this. The single most effective instructor I ever had the honor of training with was Hiron Gracie. Hiron Gracie. After training with him, I got to train with him a number of times, but the first time was down in Philadelphia. And after training with him in Philadelphia, I remember the car ride back going, that's how I want to instruct people. That's how I want to engage people in jiu-jitsu. I remember seeing the room was mesmerized by him in the way he articulated jiu-jitsu. But from me, you know, they were all lower ranks. They were like whites and blues. Me being there, I was 4-stripe brown belt at the time. I was able to take away a deeper understanding of what he was doing and how he was doing it. And I remember that was another big evolution in my teaching.
I definitely see that.
Gets it.
Yes, but conversely, so I would echo everything you say about Hiron, but conversely, and not to badmouth him because the kid is a genius and amazing, but for me, Henner is the opposite. Like, I love Henner's energy, but hanging on to everything becomes like chaotic for me. But Hiron, who works hand in hand with Henner, like I can totally absorb what he's telling me.
And I've had the opportunity to train with Henner too on multiple occasions. And same thing, there was the jiu-jitsu part of it, the knowledge he was disseminating was fantastic. But the P.T. Barnum end of it detracted from it, where I was like, you know, I was waiting for like the clowns and the marching band to come through. Where I was like, when's the banners going to drop from the ceiling and stuff? And I'm just like, bro, I just want your jiu-jitsu. I don't need to be entertained, you know? And Hiron was just, here it is, very effective, you know? Another time I got to train with Hiron was down in Maryland. And he had Brian with him, Ortega. And that was a slick seminar. But I can remember Hiron engaging the room and just talking. No, I'm sorry. Ortega was there with Henner. Hiron, oh dang, who did Hiron have? Well, never mind. But he's engaging the room, and as he's walking around the room, he's stopping with the higher ranks, the brown belts and the black belts, and thanking them for coming. Like going out of his way to shake your hand and be like, hey, where are you from? And engage you in a conversation. And I just remember being like, you know, here's one of the top paid instructors in the world currently. Who's taking time to ask about you. You know, and how are you enjoying the seminar? And is there any feedback you can give me? You have any feedback on what I'm teaching and how I'm showing it? like feedback.
Right.
No,
I appreciate
like,
it.
Yeah, right. You know, so it's just like that humility. But easily top three instructors on the planet, like for making you get jiu-jitsu.
Who else do you like?
You know, Pedro Sauer. I think
Yeah.
Pedro Sauer is fantastic.
Yeah.
And me.
Absolutely agree. No, quick Ortega story. Just a side note. One time I was in New York for UFC, and I'm in a Zara, you know, the little off-brand clothes or clothing manufacturer, whatever. And I'm looking through these sweatshirts. I'm just bent over, like rifling through them, and then I hear this voice go, "I got that shirt," and I look up and it's Ortega. I'm like, "Brian Ortega, what's up, bro?" Like, so it was cool because he didn't know me, I didn't know him,
Yeah.
but he was just striking up a conversation.
Yeah.
And at the time, his coach. I think his name was James, his striking coach. James was with them, and I got to have like a 15-minute conversation with James while Brian was trying on clothes.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like one of those things.
Yeah, he's legit like a nice guy, good dude, chill. When I was at that Henner seminar where he was at, that was at right maybe a few months before I got the black belt. So remember that old ratty brown belt I had, like it was just like,
turning white.
Turning white, yeah. So that actually relates directly to the story. So we're doing something from guard, and it was like an inverted guard roll, like a new plot or something. I forget exactly what it was, but here I am doing it, and I hear from behind me, "Bro, nice job. That was really smooth." And I stand up and I turn around. It's Brian Ortega, but he could only see the back of my belt, so he thought I was a white belt. Right?
Funny.
So I stand up and he goes, "That explains it." He's like, "You're not a white belt."
Funny.
He's like, I was about to say, like, that's the best white belt I've ever seen right there, And I said, well, that's it. I hate to disappoint you,
It's
but
threadbare.
yeah.
It's threadbare.
I might be the worst brown belt you've ever seen. But he was just a cool dude, man. He was just just salt of the earth. Took the time, and I've met people who are definitely the opposite of that. The fame and everything has gone to their head. And, you should bow down and kiss their ring. And
definitely. That's
and that's just
no
it just
good.
leaves such a bad taste in your mouth.
That's no good. But let me ask you this though, because you said about doing the inverted stuff with Brian at the seminar there, and you also mentioned how Pedro Sauer was one of your icons in jiu-jitsu, and that's to my mind, Pedro Sauer is very much old school, fundamental, smash, just gritty, self-defense oriented jiu-jitsu. And then to my mind, the inversion and all this would be more of the new
school stuff.
So where do you see the two, and how do you view the two different styles?
So I think they both have their place. They both have their usefulness. I was just talking with a student about it. Actually, I think I have it scheduled for an upcoming podcast. But I would say our identity as a whole on the Gracie and APA network is smash jiu-jitsu, like fight jiu-jitsu. And that was the way I was brought up. Hoist Gracie was one of my foremost mentors, so it was a fight jiu-jitsu. It wasn't sport. So it was, you weren't sitting back for footlocks. You weren't inverting. You weren't playing butterfly guard. Now, we were learning those things along the way, but they weren't stressed. It was, you take them down. You're not going to pull guard. You're going to take them down. You're going to achieve the dominant position, work through the hierarchy, choke them unconscious, and go home. So that's very much ingrained in the way I teach jiu-jitsu and the way I train jiu-jitsu. I never do anything fancy. You've seen me compete a number of times. You've trained with me a number of times, and there's never anything fancy. But I think the evolution of the sport has allowed that growth of things like inversion and fast scrambles and what have you, to a point where it's almost, I think it's on the verge of maybe even becoming its own art. And some people are already doing that. Sometimes you'll hear the term American Jiu-Jitsu, or you'll hear the term sport grappling, those kind of things. So I think there is starting to be like a branch off, but I would say that's more of a rule set thing. I encourage the guys to, explore the new techniques, but just put them in the light of being able to compartmentalize them in your brain. This is fight jiu-jitsu, and this is sport jiu-jitsu, and don't ever get them confused, because you can use fight jiu-jitsu in the gym. You can use fight jiu-jitsu in a tournament. You're not going to punch somebody, but you can use that style. But you don't ever want to be using sport out on the street.
Right.
You're going to dive in on a berimbolo. And I just saw a video. I think Kit Dale shared it. Guy in a fight on a beach, and he had inverted, and the guy was like hammer fisting and elbow striking his taint and his balls, you know, and I was like, yeah, that's what you get, you know, like you don't invert in a street fight.
Yeah, I mean, to my mind, jiu-jitsu is first a self-defense art, right?
Yes.
So like I think you always need to have that punch awareness, but also sport jiu-jitsu is just fun. Like I enjoy like matrix and X guard and reverse X and entering in the leg locks. Like that stuff's fun for me.
It's fun.
But like if my life depends on it, I'm not going there. I'm trying to get on top and stay on top.
Yep. And that's why I surround myself with the people that I do. You know, we're at the point now we have 7 black belts here, you know. Now they all own their own schools or you know, coach here and what have you, but I surround myself with people so that I have the ability to refer students to those people. In other words, like, you know, you come to me and you're like, Jeff, I really want to learn this spinning berimbolo to this crazy 7-step heel hook, you know, and I go, I don't know. I can watch a video, I can help you interpret that, but I don't know. You know, go talk to Crow. Dude, he's got a great leg lock. Go talk to him. You know, and that for me has been, I think, like weight off the shoulders, where I go, I don't have to know everything. I don't have to have the answer for everything. Right. You know,
and you can't know everything.
Can't know. It's impossible in this industry to know everything.
You know, one thing I learned, or one thing I realized in like all this time, is that, you know, the closer you get. So when you first start, first of all, for me, when I first started, I'm like, okay, I just got to figure out the secret technique. There's a secret technique. Once I have it, I'm good.
Yes.
And then I'm like, wow, this thing's pretty big. There's more than one secret technique. I got to learn all the secret techniques.
Yeah.
So then you're on this, chasing this tail, trying to learn all the secret techniques. And I realized, like, in the progression of jiu-jitsu is like, the closer you get to black belt, like, you have to have an understanding of a wide breadth of techniques. But the closer you get to black belt, you start pruning them away at that, right? Because you realize, like, I'm not going to use them all. I just have to have an awareness of them so that I can defend them and fight against them. But now the closer I get to black belt, I prune away and I start digging deeper and getting more depth to my technique. So the handful of things that I do, I'm able to do well.
Yes.
But I do have to have, it's like you have to learn a lot to understand that you don't need a lot in order to be good.
Right.
It's kind of like a paradox.
Yeah, it's crazy. I can, coming up, I would always remember blue belt, purple belt years. I'd have a conversation with a black belt, and along the way they'd be like, yeah, I only use like 5 techniques. I only use 7 techniques.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, you're so full of shit. You just don't want to share your secrets with me.
Right.
You know, like you're holding back on me.
Right.
You know, and now at black belt, I do that myself where I go, yeah, I do like 5 things.
Yes.
Like I'm going to just do this, and then I'm going to guillotine you.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know where the guillotine's going to come from, but it's going to come.
And it's like Hodger. We were listening to Hodger on the way up here. It's like everyone knew Hodger was going to take you down, pass guard, mount you, and cross you.
Yes.
You know,
right?
But you can't stop it.
Yeah.
So everyone's thinking, like, if you're a white belt or a blue belt and you see Hodger dominating everybody, the assumption is this guy must know like every technique, and I got to figure out all the techniques he knows.
Yep.
But then you realize, no, he probably is aware of all the techniques, but he's only doing 4 of them, and he's smashing you because you can't stop.
He just does it perfectly.
Yeah,
does it perfectly. The entire decade plus that I trained with Hoist, he would, and I could never figure it out. He would brutalize me with cross collar choke from the mount to an arm lock.
Yes.
That was it. Every time we would roll. That's how he would tap me.
Yes.
You know, now obviously every time is an exaggeration, but 9 out of 10 times that's how he's tapped me.
Yes.
He would mount me, he'd put his hand in my collar, I would defend it, and he'd shoot the arm lock.
Yes.
And he would laugh.
Yes.
You know? But it was done at such a level of pick your poison.
Yes.
You know, it was like, here you go. Both these things are going to kill you. Pick one.
It's A or B.
And it was A or B, and you couldn't stop it.
Yeah.
And that for me was a strong influence on the way I've put together blueprints and strategy and techniques, where I just say it's A or it's B.
Right.
And either one is a bad decision for you.
Yes. You know? And on the flip side of that, though, I think you'll have guys who, again, like maybe you're a white belt or a blue belt, and you just don't know what you don't know. So you see maybe you see a Gordon Ryan that's entering leg locks, or Gary, and they're doing these leg locks and they're just brutalizing people with leg locks. So then you might make the assumption that, okay, if I just get really good at leg locks, I can brutalize people. And then maybe you get a blue belt who has a brown belt level leg lock, and so maybe he's beating purple belts and even catching brown belts occasionally.
Yes.
So then the misperception is, wow, this kid's a great blue belt. But if the opportunity doesn't present itself to use the leg lock, you see that if the foundation is lacking,
Right. Yeah.
so then he's getting smashed and hammered.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's like, this is why jiu-jitsu takes so long, because you have to first build the foundation to understand the things so that you can later start pruning the things and really hone in on them.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's like there's no shortcut.
There is no shortcut.
It's mat time.
Right.
It's mat time. And you have guys that may say, I started jiu-jitsu in 2004. Okay, bro, but how many hours have you put on the mat?
Right.
How many weeks and months and years did you go away? What's your total mat time in the last 10 years?
Yeah.
Have you been on the mat for a year? Or have you been on the mat for 9.5 years?
Right.
Like, I don't care when you start. I care how much time you put on the mat.
Put in. Yeah. You might have a guy that's only training 6 years, but he's putting in 8 hours a day.
Right.
You go out to Marcelo Garcia's, you'll
Yes.
find that.
Yes.
Like, you'll find that guy who's like a 3-stripe blue belt and wrecks your world.
Yes.
And you're like, what just happened?
Yes.
Well, this kid's on the mat 8 hours a day
Right.
for the last 5 years, 6 years.
He's got black belt time
yes,
invested.
Correct. And then you have other guys who, I've met them through the years, I've been training 30 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah, I started back in 95, but I took 5 years off.
Right.
Then I came back and I got my blue belt. And then I took like 6
Yeah.
years off. And no, you haven't been training 30 years then, bro.
Right. Exactly.
You had
Add
your
it
first
up.
lesson 30 years ago.
You got about 6 months of jiu-jitsu.
Right, yeah. But these guys will tell you that.
Right.
They'll be like, I trained 30 years,
But the thing you always say is the mats don't lie, right?
Mats don't lie.
So I don't even really care what belt you're sporting. I'm gonna know when you get on the mat.
Know as
Like,
soon as we
if you're beating my butt, I know you're pretty good.
Yeah.
And if I'm beating your butt, I know you're not that good.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, and that's the beauty of it. There's this technique is too deadly for you.
Right.
I can't even use this technique. It's too deadly. Well, how do you know? Did you kill somebody?
Right. Right.
Right. How do you know that? With jiu-jitsu, we know.
Exactly.
There's no bullshit.
Exactly.
There's no bullshit in that, and that's been one of the longest running attractions for me.
It's the truth serum.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the truth serum.
Yeah, and it just enlightens people. I'm sure you've had the experience. It's not too much anymore. Every once in a while you'll find somebody, but that still doesn't believe in jiu-jitsu. They still don't believe in the power of jiu-jitsu.
That's because they haven't gotten on the mat with someone who
right. They've
understands
avoided
jiu-jitsu.
it. Yeah, they've avoided it.
A lot of guys, man, they have ego, and they, I fight and I see red, and then I don't remember what happens till I wake up and read about the other guy in the newspaper. Okay, come into the gym tonight, and let's see how you feel at the end of the night. And those guys usually don't come back the next night because they don't have the humility to say, "I'm not what I thought I was."
Yeah. Yep.
It's the truth serum. Like, if you think you're bad, you get on the mat with someone who knows what they're doing. Mm-hmm. You will know in that moment, are you really bad? Yeah. Are you like a bad guy? Or are you just an average dude?
And most of the time, it's the average dude.
You're the average dude.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, every once in a while, you get that guy that came in with that attitude of like, I just black out, and they do come back. They but it's few and far between.
It's because it's this blow to the ego, especially when you're the guy maybe who's been athletic all your life, and maybe you've been a brute and you've been able to just run over untrained people. Yeah. So in your mind, you're that guy.
Right. Yeah.
And if people don't know what they don't know, so you just assume, hey, I'm the top dog.
Yeah.
And then someone says, let me introduce you to jiu-jitsu.
Yes.
Let me introduce you to leverage and timing and technique and strategy, and see how well your physical attributes hold up against that. We had a discussion. I texted you the other week, and I said, Coach, Eddie Bravo, 10th Planet. Oh, no, I'm sorry, not everybody. Joe Rogan, 10th Planet Black Belt, or The Rock. And in my head, like, I spent 2 days going over every possible scenario, and I'm like, I can't come to a conclusion. I'm like, Coach, what do you think?
Yeah.
What'd you tell me?
I think it was 2 sentences. I said, no time limit to the death. I believe in jiu-jitsu. Joe Rogan.
And I was like...
That finger doesn't work, by the way. See how that finger doesn't work?
Yeah, you got that trigger finger. And I was left scratching my head because I had just spent 2 days telling my guy Logan, like, I said, Logan, listen, man. I said, I believe in jiu-jitsu, right? But The Rock is different. Like, you're talking about a guy who's like... He's barely even human. Like, he's a demigod. Yes. I'm I'm like, and jiu-jitsu is the great equalizer, but like there's some things that some deficits that can't be overcome. I said, you know, if you put The Rock against a physical specimen like Buchecha or Gordon or Hodger, I'm like, I take them all day without fail. I'm like, but Rogan's not that big a dude, and Rock is so explosive and so powerful that he might be able to just blow out of stuff. And I'm tormented. I'm waking up at night trying to like come to a conclusion. And then I'm like, I'm gonna ask Coach, and you're like, I believe in jiu-jitsu, and I'm like, I had to rethink my
maybe if it was rounds, you know, like a 5-minute round, I'll bet on The Rock. I'll bet on at least like a stalemate.
Yeah.
You know, but to the death, no time limit.
Eventually, he's going to exhaust, right?
They all do. They all do. I've had that so many times through the years where I get a big guy who comes in from a powerlifting or wrestling background, and 5 minutes on the clock, and those first 2 minutes, they go and they go and they go, and then at 2 minutes and 1 second, they go, I can't go anymore.
Yeah.
No, bro. Now it's my time.
Step into my world.
Now it's my time. You know, and I remember having a heavyweight wrestler come in. I think he actually wrestled for Williamsport. Yeah, that's your alma mater, right?
Yes, sir.
Don't remember his name, but I remember him coming in to train with us, and that's exactly what happened. He was like, bah, 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 you know, and I'm just underneath him, like getting fucking wrecked. Because at that point, I was probably like 140, 145. I was light, just getting annihilated. And then it went, and I went, oh, you're dead now.
Yeah. And then what did they say? What did they say?
They always say, let's stop. Let me catch my breath. I'm good.
No, you're not good.
Now you're going to be good when I choke you.
Yes. You're good when you tap.
Yes. That's when we're good. And I don't let people do that anymore. If you come in and you're a big explosive guy, and you know you ragdoll me around a little bit, and then I mount you, and you tap, I don't get off the mount. I don't get off the mount. This is exactly how it'll go down all the time. And a couple of people who are watching have definitely experienced this. Okay, I'm done. Are you injured? You okay? I just can't breathe. Well, that doesn't count.
Ooh.
I'm going to remount you now, and you're going to figure a way out of it.
Ooh.
You know, because if you don't, you never will.
Right.
You never will. If I just get off of you and we start over again, and you just go bananas again, then you just go bananas again until you're tired. So you never understand how to push through that. You know, I can go an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. You know, I'll push through it. It's not that I'm not tired. It's not that I don't want to quit, because I would. You don't want to quit after an hour or two, but I've conditioned my mind and body to go through that. You know, there was a time Rodrigo Gracie had come in. This led to me getting my brown belt. I was a 4-stripe purple belt. We were still on Mulberry Street. Rodrigo Gracie had done a seminar tour of like Hoyce's Academy, so he went like around. We were the last stop on the train there, and puts on a great seminar. And at the end, we're rolling. And first 5 minutes, I do okay. You know, like he's Rodrigo, he's big physical specimen. You know, it's like I'm just surviving. Second 10 minutes, you know, first bell rings, ding ding ding. You know, Cracker. That's what he always called me, Cracker. Cracker, you're staying with me. Everybody else switch partners. We roll again. All right, 10 minutes goes by. I'm surviving. I'm hanging on. You know, ding, ding, ding. I'm like, thank God that's over. Cracker, stay with me. Everybody else switch. I'm like, oh fuck. What's going on? You know, like I'm taking a beating.
You're in the crucible now.
Right. You know, and now round 3, I'm taking a beating. Round 4, I'm taking a beating. Every time the bell rings, I'm just thinking like, fuck. Like he's got to let me go at some point. 40 minutes later, he's like I'm literally crawling. It would be a tap, and I'd crawl back to slap and bump, you know, and but my mentality was like, I'll die here today before I tell you I'm going to quit. You know, like I will die right here on this mat before you hear me utter the words I quit. You know, and
why were you so determined?
I don't know. It was just, that was the mentality. You know, it was like, you will kill me. You know, before I say those words. And we wound up going out to dinner afterwards, and I remember being like, you know, dipping out in my food basically, like, and he's on the phone and he's chatting away in Portuguese, and I came to find out later on he was on the phone with Hoyce and telling Hoyce, like, bro, I tried to kill him, like, you got to give this dude a brown belt, you know, and he had said none of the other places he had stopped, nobody else had gone beyond 2 rounds with him. You know, and he made the comment, he's like, you would have fucking died on that. I said, goddamn right I would have. You know, in that moment, that was the decision I had made. You know, now you can't train that way all the time. You can't train that way on a daily basis. You know, you got to prolong your body, prolong your health, prolong, you know, your muscles and joints and everything like that. But in that moment,
go for it.
We were going,
You know, I remember rolling with Rodrigo one time, and just being like, feeling so helpless.
Yeah.
Like, because there again, you have a guy who's not just spectacular jiu-jitsu, but he's also an athletic specimen, and it's just like, and I remember he was teaching that he would show a lasso, spider, and we would invert to a triangle.
Yes,
invert
I
to a
still use
fly.
that.
Love that.
I still use. I just was teaching that last week to somebody.
Love it.
In a private. Yeah.
Love
I
it.
still use. It's fantastic. So, well, let's start wrapping this up here. So, future. What does the future hold for Scott Diggs?
So my future kind of like I want to develop my own brand association with, of course, Gracie NEPA as my guiding light. So for the last, I don't know, 12 or 15 years, I've been a part of Team Vicious and more MMA oriented.
Yeah.
And I've always had some idea that when my daughter, who's the younger of my two kids, that when she graduated from school, I would have more resources, more time to invest in building my own thing. So she graduated right before COVID. And now with COVID dying down, I'm kind of in this transition where I'm looking at the prospect of heading out on my own, building my own jiu-jitsu, that of course has you backing me, hopefully, and supporting me, and I really just want to build good jiu-jitsu players as efficiently as possible with my own brand. You know?
Your own. Yeah. It's awesome, man. Well, first official guest on what time is it? I appreciate you making the time for it. We got our blueprint coming up, so let's go train, brother.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Where are we going here?
Listen, that one.
That one.
Can we do this one? And this one? Good. Thank you, man.
Thank you, man.